Hi, my name's Seven, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Orchid Labs, based in San Francisco. As you can maybe tell, I'm from here, and it's great to be back home and be part of this community, which is definitely one of the most vibrant Ethereum communities around. It's exciting to be here and see all these hackers hacking on all the stuff here. I'm here to talk to you about Orchid, and specifically how we've built privacy, decentralized approach to digital privacy on the Ethereum blockchain. So I'm a little bit older than some of you, and I've been at this tech thing for a while. I guess it's still a thing. And back when I got on the internet, when I was at Cambridge, I think it was like '89, I got my first email address. And there were no web browsers. And the kind of exciting thing about it at the time was you just get out there and explore and talk to random people and random places, and whatever your kind of niche interest was, you kind of got into that. And it was just fascinating. So it's supposed to be this like place where you could really be, quite free and open, and whatever your thing was, you could kind of meet someone else who that was their thing, and then things kind of changed, and I think I remember. So like I was playing around with the first web browsers with Mosaic, and then later when cookies were sort of first proposed as an idea, we were just like, hang on a second, are people willing to really give up their privacy for this convenience of this cookie that allows you to log into multiple sites? And then next thing you know, you had cross-site cookies, in other words, cookies that really moved between sites and allowed people to track you on different places. And this seemed like a really weird trade-off, but everyone went for it. And then the next thing you had social media, and then now we have phones that track you, and just like the whole thing is just like turned into this big mess of every time you get online, you're just really not sure what's going on. Are you being tracked? Like how much are you being tracked? What are they doing with the data? And we see all of these trends now, whether it's with companies or with states and countries, where we're starting to realize that this trade-off is something that we're just not sure we want to kind of make, right? And when you get into the sort of statistics on global surveillance and what kind of countries are doing what kind of surveillance, certainly in Europe, we've now got something called GDPR, which is both a plus and a positive and a negative as far as it comes to privacy. It's a little bit easier to tell someone to remove your data, but now the onus is on some of the companies to do that, and it's kind of harder to innovate. In the US, yeah, we definitely got a lot of issues. Poor old Mark had to sit in front of the Senate and explain why, and then when they tried to launch a digital currency with Libra, it got even worse. China, I think we're all very familiar with the Great Firewall and what's happening there. Not only that, but in many countries there are now actual internet shutdowns, so you'll get elections on a national level or local level, and they'll just shut down the internet. Sorry, you can't comment on what's happening. So we're in this situation now where there's not only a lot of censorship, it's also surveillance. Surveillance has become really a part of daily life. And censorship, which is the other side of this, is a very serious issue now with what's happening on a global level now with the spread of this virus, this very serious COVID-19, which is affecting the world and causing a lot of shutdowns of events, restriction in travel. One of the original discoverers of this virus, who sadly died in China, was trying to get the word out on WeChat and trying to get the word out in different social media channels, and was heavily censored. And the actual data coming out of China is still hard to trust because it tends to fit this very predictable curve of how a not so serious virus spread should look, and who knows whether that data is accurate or not. So we start seeing a lot of this stuff actually having a real impact on us globally. Again, on the corporate level, we're starting to realize that you are the product. Like literally, you are the way that Facebook and Google and all the companies have made money. And a lot of this is due to the real inherent architecture that started off with the initial design of the internet, and the fact that you have to use servers, and you have to say, well, okay, I have a central server, how am I going to make money on giving this free thing away? Well, I'm going to track data, I'm going to build models on different people, I'm going to send them advertising, and so it kind of naturally falls into the situation where to give something away freely, you need to have a product, and you guys are the product. So the collection of user data is very critical. But people are starting to get the idea here that this trade-off's not something they're willing to make. And when you talk to the younger generation globally, even though they're jumping on Snapchat and Instagram, my son, who's 12, about to turn 13, has said to me recently, he's like, I want to get an Instagram account, but I kind of like, do they own all my photos now? And are they tracking me? And what's going on? Is there anything else I could use? And so people are starting to, in younger generations, starting to realize this trade-off is something they might not want to make, and they're looking for other solutions. And many of the people here who are building products based on this decentralized architecture, Ethereum and other systems, are trying to give people those tools. We're focused on a very specific idea here, which is the use of VPNs. So VPNs are not a panacea for all the things I've been talking about. They certainly don't solve the cookie issue, they don't solve the collection of data by Google or Facebook, but they solve a very specific problem, which is the protection of the traffic information about where you're going and what you're doing. And in classic VPNs, the architecture is essentially fundamentally centralized. And so in other words, kind of one way to think about it is a paid man-in-the-middle attack. So you have a man-in-the-middle attack, which is somebody sitting between you and where you want to go, and with a VPN, you're paying that person to route your traffic. Now, maybe you can trust them, maybe you can't. And unfortunately, in the VPN space right now, hi, are you going to help? She's an expert on VPNs, actually. No, really. In the VPN space right now, I wish there was one or two people who I could absolutely say, yes, you can really trust these guys. And we've selected a number of partners who we believe are great and actually adhere to the principles we're looking for. But the reality is that the space is very fragmented. And it's even more so when you go to different regions of the world. And it's actually quite hard to know what a VPN is doing. And sometimes there's a situation where the VPN company says they're not logging, and then it turns out that after a subpoena or other investigation, it turns out that they are. So we think that this kind of concentration of power lends itself really well to decentralized technologies. I gave a talk a couple of years ago at the Web3 Summit talking about this idea of what are the killer apps in this space. And hi, do you want to hang out? Do you want to come sit down? Yeah, come here, you sit with me. Come on, I'll give you a sticker later. So the decentralization, really I think we've had a couple of actual killer apps. The first one is Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is a killer app which breaks the centralized control of governments and banks. Right? It allows you to control your own money, you to have your keys, you to have a bank account. Okay. And the second one is Ethereum. Ethereum's killer app originally was the ICO. We now have DeFi, which is a separate conversation. But the ICO was breaking the control of the kind of boys club of Silicon Valley VCs. Right? It's like they're the ones who decide what's a good idea. They're the ones who decide that Snapchat's a better idea than trying to put satellites in space and give us flying cars. So that's what gets invested in. Please come on. With ICOs, we got to experiment with all sorts of crazy ideas. And one of those things, turned out to be us. And many of these things we actually didn't do an ICO, just for the record. So many of these ideas got the chance to have this experimentation aspect put into them. The control of communications, as I've been explaining, is not only by states and countries, but also by companies. And so we believe that this idea, and VPN is just one first example of this, of decentralizing communications and decentralizing the way that, in this case, VPNs are used, could be a very powerful example of a killer app in the space. Standard VPNs are, as I mentioned before, centralized, non-transparent, meaning like who knows what this code is running on the server, what's going on. And also non-incentivized in the case of the more free versions that are out there already. In contrast, we're a decentralized approach. We're transparent. All of our code is open source. You can look at the server code, you can look at the client code, you can compile it, you can run it yourself, you can build your own version of Orchid. And it's also incentivized. So what does that mean? This is a really cool picture. The basic architecture is as follows, which is that there is an app, and if I could screen share onto the screen, I would show you, but we have apps. This is running Orchid right now. This app has a number of what we call hops. In the case of a single hop, which I'm running right now, it's like a standard VPN. I'm connecting to a provider, some node, which is then passing my traffic off to the internet resource in the case of a website, or it could be a game, or it could be a virtual reality resource, or it could be a WhatsApp video call, and then passing that back to me, encrypted. And I can also add another hop, which is then I have multiple hops. Once I do that, my internet traffic is then private. So in other words, the person who I'm requesting from eventually, the resource, whether it's a website, doesn't actually know what my IP address is because it's bounced through a couple of people along the way. The providers in this system, you're asking how do these guys get paid? Well, these guys get paid using our currency, which is the OXT, which is an ERC20 token. And the providers are then paid using this. And so essentially it's a peer-to-peer architecture where we're not in the middle, there's no one in the middle, it's direct communication between these two parties. And then the next question is, how do we scale this? Because we're using Ethereum. Doesn't Ethereum break? I mean, CryptoKitties was this great example. The ICO boom led to Ethereum blockchain slowing down significantly each time there was a big crowd sale. Well, we invented this new idea, which you can kind of see in this really cool graphic. It's called probabilistic nanopayments. So the actual currency of our network is not OXT. The actual currency of our network is these nanopayments. And what nanopayments are is that if all of you guys are providers in this room and I'm sending nanopayments to one of you and nanopayments to another one for the next one, each time you get a nanopayment, you're like, actually, hang on a second, let me take a look at this. Oh, actually, this one's worth nothing. And the next one you get, it's like, oh, this one's worth nothing. Oh, this one's worth nothing. And finally, you get something that is worth something, and you're like, well, I'm finding else. But this one, imagine this is the winning one, this one is worth a lot. And Justin gave a talk last night, and if you want to come learn more about the specific design of this, he's available. He's one of the main designers of this architecture. So the idea is the expected value of your payment over that connection is the same as if we'd done every single transaction on chain. And the advantage of this is obviously we're not clogging up the blockchain with all these kind of things. And it actually lends itself to a number of other ideas, and we're very open to talking about different ideas we have of how you could use nanopayments in different architectures, not just for bandwidth. As I mentioned before, we use these multiple hops. The hops meme isn't also connected to the rabbit meme, which is part of our mimetic brand. But the hops is very serious. It allows, as I said, to have an IP anonymity on that level. And where's the money? And we're also, of course, very interested in supporting and discussing other ideas around privacy. There's the guys from Aztec here. I was a seed investor in Zcash. We're like very, very interested in the ideas around the combination of decentralized approaches and privacy. I have I'm going to plug my own mailing list. I have a new mailing list which talks about a lot of these intersections. I've been talking every week about different ideas in this space and what I'm noticing, especially just recently with a lot of the censorships that are happening on the global health crisis. I'm available, as is Justin, until probably like midday Sunday, and then we'll be in Paris next week also. We're based in San Francisco and also Berlin. We're starting an office in Berlin this summer. So we'll be back and forth to Europe quite a bit. I'm very excited to connect to communities. We're hiring technical people, business people, marketing people. That's right, we launched the network in December. We're currently listed on one of the US exchanges. We're going to be expanding globally into lots of other regions of the world. Love to chat to any of you and discuss partnership opportunities. Thank you. Questions? Do you have time for questions? How's my time? Oh, I've got 10 minutes. 10 minutes? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? Okay, great. Next, who wants to go first? Do you want to ask me a question? Richard, any questions at the back? No?
How do you intend, so people are going to use this for like nefarious purposes, let's say, and to access whatever,
Are we still on camera? Can we stop recording?
Is there a going? Yeah, people are going to use this for like nefarious purposes, like fraud, all of that. How are you going to deal with like regulators where, you know, like some malicious thing came from one of your nodes. Is that node going to be held responsible, or like who's going to?
Okay, is that off the record?
Still recording.
Still recording. Can you come ask me that question later on? Can you ask me that question later on? Yeah, I'll answer it differently than the one I'll ask it now. I guess the general comment I have on that is that this becomes an encryption debate. And so it's very similar to the idea of putting backdoors into Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp. The internet, like any technology, can be used for things that we consider good and things that we consider bad. And the things that we consider okay to do here are not considered okay to do in many parts of the world. For example, reading about how some people think that the government sucks. Right? We're very happy in the UK to talk about how, even if we've elected the Prime Minister, the next day we're like, well, he sucks, right? It's kind of like an English thing. The Queen doesn't suck, obviously, but the Prime Minister always sucks. So it's kind of that's such a good thing about having a monarchy. There is obviously a potential to use any technology, and the internet does have certain things on it that I don't think are good. But I guess I would look at it like this, is that we are aiming to give you the VPN you expected, which is private and not logged, for example. And should people decide that that is not a good thing for society, then obviously we'd be happy to comply with that. But currently VPNs are not illegal in this country, at least. They are illegal in many countries.
Similar to agencies operating towards forms and collecting IPs, can you protect from other government agencies that are acting as a node and then logging all that data?
Well, it depends who's doing the logging and what part of the network they're in, right? So if you're logging as a relay, then that doesn't really help you. If you're logging as an exit, then the IP information, if you use multiple hops, isn't very useful to you. There is obviously personally identifiable information in many parts of the network stream. And I would certainly advise people who are using public Wi-Fi, for example, to use a VPN, whether it's ours or other people's, right away, because that router is potentially compromised. One of the challenges with the internet right now is that in spite of the things like SSL everywhere, and that campaign to really make all websites use SSL, a large fraction of all internet traffic that you use in different apps and even web browsers is still HTTP, which is really unclear. A lot of email clients are still basically insecure. I think Instagram messages right now are basically set in the clear. So it's quite hard for the average user to understand what's in the clear and what's not. DNS information is in the clear currently. There's new approaches of DNS over TLS that's going to help that in the future. But a large fraction of the traffic that you're sending is basically in the clear and includes information about kind of information that's tagged into the URL or other IP information that identifies you. So one of the interesting things we've done with our system is that the traditional way of thinking about how Orchid might grow would be that we need to increase the number of nodes that are within the network, and then we're going to have this massive universe of nodes. What we realized is actually, to your point, is how do you know if you can trust the people who you're sending traffic to? So let's say you set up a VPN server using Orchid, and your mates trust you, and so you're like, okay, I'm going to trust him to do this thing, and you've got some other friends who are also running systems. So you can set up this little kind of micro-universe of Orchid nodes, and you could route the traffic through it, and you give it to your friends almost for free. You could set your pricing differently. So we support that capability, and the way you do it actually is you set up a smart contract which contains the information about your nodes and your friends' nodes are doing it, and you publish that, and you can set that in the client, and it's called a curator. So our vision for this is that the universe of curators will grow, rather than necessarily, like one of them may dominate and become like a large curator of nodes that are trustworthy. The way we've set it up initially is that we've screened 6 different VPN companies, and they're providing bandwidth and nodes within the network, and that's the sort of default ORCID curator. But in some of the future hackathons coming up, including Paris, we'll be explaining how to actually adjust that and put in your own curated lists and run it as a DAO. I think this is the year of the DAOs, I've been told, so this is when that happens. We're going to put DAOs in everyone's pockets. Yeah.
So if you've chosen to triple hop to like give you maximum IP protection, what's the performance relative to other systems like Tor?
Well, relative to Tor, which you mentioned, so Tor's a different idea. So Tor is a browser with networking built into the browser, so it's working on an HTTPS level. We're a system-wide VPN. If you don't use a hardened browser, for example, you're still subject to JavaScript injection on the end, which is another reason why we recommend using these curated list of nodes that you trust in some way or someone else trusts, like some non-profit organization that decides that you trust that these are the good people. And obviously with DAO structures, you can then sort of vote people in and out or slash them out in different ways. Because of system-wide VPN versus a browser plus networking architecture, we do get higher performance. So currently, we've been doing user tests where people are doing video streaming over popular messaging applications using multiple hops, including in some regions which would typically be considered hard to use.
So is are you expecting the motivation for relaying connections is going to be financial or kind of ideological?
Missionary or mercenary?
Eh?
Missionary or mercenary?
Yeah.
Or a combination of the two?
Yeah, because I would imagine that the amount that you could actually generate from relaying transactions is not really going to be a lot.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are other things out there. There's people looking to build mesh networking architectures where you just run these things out of your home, and they actually also, as you point out, just really doesn't add up to very much. And a lot of people are doing that really from a perspective of, well, this is kind of cool. Like I'll help out, I'll do this thing. It's like a hobbyist kind of thing. As I mentioned, I was a seed investor in Zcash, and I set up a Amazon cloud instance and tried to get the fastest GPUs on it and put a bunch of money into it and mine 0 Zcash. But I did it because I was excited to be part of it, and Zuko tweeted for me, and it was kind of fun. But the reality is that if you've got a DSL connection at home or a cable modem at home, and you've got pretty bad upstream and actually relatively bad downstream as well, you're actually not going to be very helpful to most people. But you might be helpful in some of the small instances, amongst the niche cases that I was explaining. If you are running it out of a university dorm room and you've actually got like ripping fast up and down, and you kind of have access to sort of a couple of big machines, maybe that's helpful. But we also see this as a way to, as we saw in the case of something like Ethereum mining or some of the altcoin minings, people actually set up little co-location facilities, and they put a machine there and a couple of machines there, and they say, okay, well, maybe I'll start my own little micro VPN business out of this thing. And I know a number of people who have sort of like little lifestyle VPN businesses where they serve, a couple of hundred people or a couple of thousand people. They're not at the sort of millions or tens of millions like other people have done. And we think that's interesting. We think there's a potential there for both doing it as a way to improve the openness of the internet in a general sense, and also to potentially at least cover your costs and maybe make some money.
Can you choose your exit node country like you can on commercial VPN?
Currently, no, and we have some philosophical ideas around that.
If you want to watch like British TV when you're in America.
Yeah, so we're looking at ways to do that. But what you can do in the system is, as it grows a little bit more, because currently we have just it's actually a very wide network, but a small number of nodes in the system. You can specify in one of the contracts that advertises your node, parameters in there which say where you are. Now, whether you really are where you say you are or where you don't say where you are is kind of something that actually goes into other issues around VPNs and whether you trust those people. This all gets a little bit weird with things like Cloudflare and just in general like how the internet really works today. Because what you really want is, you don't actually want to say that I want my VPN to be in London. What you want is a particular service. What you want is the BBC. And so you might be able to access the BBC from somewhere else. So what you kind of want is you want to like search for, can I get this service from somewhere versus can I get a server in this location?
The commercial television stations usually do geo-blocking, but they also disable VPNs. So if you're using commercial VPNs, they'll still be disabled. But if you crowd stream your VPN, then they might pass.
Potentially, and obviously we're talking about things that are breaking copyright law, so we can't comment necessarily on all those things. But we try not to comment on those things like that. But hi. And we can chat more about that. There's been quite a bit of pretty kind of nefarious activity among some VPN providers where there's people selling what appear to be residential IP addresses and actually aren't. And there was a whole market on that in the last few years, which led to some interesting abuses. But yeah, so one of my personal use cases is I would love to watch the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics covered by the BBC, where there apparently are more countries playing versus when I'm watching in the US, it feels like there's only one country playing. So it's like a bit of a surprise, right? Are we good? Okay, got to wrap it up. I'm here, Justin's here. Thank you.